Amid the intensifying conflict in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu delivered a strong message to French President Emmanuel Macron, criticizing calls from Western leaders for an arms embargo on Israel. Addressing his speech directly to Macron, Netanyahu condemned the embargo proposals, emphasizing Israel's fight for survival as it battles on 7 active fronts against what he described as the enemies of civilization. Netanyahu detailed the ongoing conflict, which began on October 7th when Hamas launched a brutal attack on Israel, killing, raping, beheading, and burning Israeli civilians in a series of unprecedented atrocities. Israel has since been engaged in a fierce fight in Gaza against Hamas, which the Prime Minister called savages. In addition to Gaza, Israel is facing Hezbollah in Lebanon, which Netanyahu described as the most heavily armed terrorist organization in the world. Hezbollah, he stated, had been planning an even larger massacre along Israel's northern border and has continued to launch rocket attacks on Israeli towns and cities. Israel is also contending with missile and drone attacks from the Houthis in Yemen, as well as Iran-backed militias in Iraq and Syria. Netanyahu noted that these groups have launched hundreds of attacks on Israel in recent weeks. Furthermore, Israeli forces are confronting terrorists in Judea and Samaria, who have been targeting civilians in the heart of Israeli cities. At the core of the conflict, according to Netanyahu, is Iran. He accused Iran of orchestrating and funding these assaults, pointing out that just last week, Iran fired over 200 ballistic missiles directly at Israel. Iran stands behind this 7-front war against Israel, Netanyahu said, asserting that the Islamic Republic leads the axis of terror that includes Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and other militant groups. In his address to President Macron and other Western leaders, Netanyahu expressed outrage over the calls for an arms embargo on Israel. He questioned why no such embargo was being imposed on Iran or its proxies, who continue to receive weapons and support unchecked. Shame on them, Netanyahu declared, emphasizing that Israel will continue its fight regardless of international support. He underscored that while Israel will emerge victorious, the moral stain of those calling for an arms embargo will linger. In defending ourselves against this barbarism, Israel is defending civilizations against those who seek to impose a dark age of fanaticism on all of us, Netanyahu stated. The Prime Minister concluded by reaffirming Israel's resolve to fight until the conflict is won, for the security of Israel and the peace of the entire world.
I have a message for President Macron. Today, Israel is defending itself on 7 fronts against the enemies of civilization. We're fighting in Gaza against Hamas, those savages who murdered, raped, beheaded, and burned our people on October 7th. We're fighting in Lebanon against Hezbollah, the most heavily armed terror organization in the world, which was planning an even greater massacre than October 7th on our northern border, and that has rocketed Israeli towns and cities for nearly a year. We're fighting against the Houthis in Yemen and the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria that together have launched hundreds of drones and missile attacks against Israel. We're fighting against terrorists in Judea and Samaria who are trying to murder civilians in the heart of our cities. And we're fighting against Iran, which last week fired over 200 ballistic missiles directly at Israel, and which stands behind the 7-front war against Israel. As Israel fights the forces of barbarism led by Iran, all civilized countries should be standing firmly by Israel's side. Yet President Macron and some other Western leaders are now calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Shame on them. Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas, and on its other proxies? Of course not. The axis of terror stands together. But countries who supposedly oppose this terror axis call for an arms embargo on Israel. What a disgrace. Well, let me tell you this. Israel will win with or without their support. But their shame will continue long after the war is won. For in defending ourselves against this barbarism, Israel is defending civilizations against those who seek to impose a dark age of fanaticism on all of us. Rest assured, Israel will fight until the battle is won, for our sake and for the sake of the peace and security of the entire world.